Welcome to another episode podcast of Bluff City Magazine. Y'all, we sit down with entrepreneurs, influential figures, change makers, civil leaders, people who are doing some amazing things in our community. And right now we are prepping for our June, July edition. We are honoring men across the Mid-South who are just doing incredible things. And today we have a male judge sitting with me. I'm so excited. We are in the judicial realm. And y'all, this is going to be great. So y'all, please stay tuned and like and subscribe our channel, by the way. So let me introduce our guest. Our guest today has spent more than 2 decades serving the people of Memphis and Shelby County through some of the most demanding areas of the criminal justice system, from prosecutor to appellate work to now serving as criminal court judge for Division 1. His career has been built around public service, leadership under pressure, and navigating some of the most serious cases our city has ever seen. But beyond the courtroom and the road, there's also a deeply personal story of resilience, sacrifice, survival, discipline, and purpose. He's a former boxer, a cancer survivor, and someone who has spent his life answering the call to serve, even in the toughest environments. And we present Judge Ray Lepone. Hi, Judge. How are you?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here. And that was quite an introduction.
Yes.
And we are going to delve into your story. We have a lot to unpack.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so you are actually from Philly, Baltimore area and all of that, and then you moved to Memphis. What made you say, I'm here in Memphis, this is home now?
Well, it was interesting how I got here. I had went to college in Georgia at Kennesaw State, and one of my close friends, we both went back to school a little older, and we were both married at the time. And so we were looking at where we would go to school, like law school, and we came and visited Memphis. And the idea was, when we got here, was that we would both get into University of Memphis School of Law. If we got accepted, we'd come here together and then move back to Georgia after law school and take the Georgia bar. He actually ended up doing that and became the district attorney over Polk and Haralson County in Georgia. But I started to work here, an intern here, and then I clerked for the judges at Till and Poplar and just fell in love with the city, and I said, I'm staying.
I love it. So is it safe to say, since you are from Philly, that you're an Eagles fan?
I think that's a well-known fact. If you go around most people that know me, that's probably one of the first things they'll tell you about me, other than my love for pizza. They'll come right in next. So yeah, he's, unfortunately, the way they say it, an Eagles fan.
And just to think, you are an Eagles fan in a city that's full of Cowboys, which is, the opponent, I guess, in the same division, right?
Yes, and I will tell you, so in my courtroom, we have deputies in there for, courtroom security purposes, and they're all Cowboys fans. So I had to ask them, I'm like, I'm not so sure, knowing that I'm an Eagles fan, that I want you providing security
Yeah.
for me in the courtroom.
That's funny. That's funny. So you've been here, almost 30 years?
30 years.
And
yes.
You and your wife, Stephanie, has raised 3 daughters?
Yes.
So what do you do for fun as like a family unit?
Well, I'll tell you, with the busy schedules, we just became empty nesters. And so May is just finishing her freshman year at UT, and Mary's actually graduating from UT next week from nursing school. But for the longest time, they played soccer and sports.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, a lot of times the schools, when you've got 3 kids in sports, they don't always put the events at the same time or at the same location. So we spent a lot of our time, going to Mike Rose and different fields. And so a lot of the time that we had really was focused on them. So now that we are empty nesters for the first time, it's interesting. My wife's picked up this mahjong thing, which I don't have any part of. And
explain what that is.
I don't know. She's trying to teach me the rules. And then for me personally, boxing's always been my outlet. And I grew up in it, was former amateur boxer.
Mm-hmm.
And so, coaching with Mike Cook is somebody that I got connected with. And so being an amateur boxing coach is really my outlet.
What made you pick that particular hobby or that sport as a hobby, boxing versus something else?
Well, it's interesting. I got introduced to it at a very young age because my childhood friend outside of Baltimore, his father was a boxer and a martial artist. And so I was able to get taught personally by, my best friend's father. And that's how I started getting into matches as a young child, and then just kind of stuck with it. And, I played a lot of team sports,
Okay.
but the thing for boxing for me, it's one of those things where even though you have people in your corner, you have to really dig deep and take care of things yourself. So it gives you this sense of confidence and discipline. And it also allows you to overcome things and to rely just on yourself without needing other people to rely on.
So if you're coaching a young man who's into boxing, and let's just say they have maybe some anger issues,
Mhm.
that is a good outlet, to let go of some steam. But boxing kind of still teaches you some other characteristics.
Oh, absolutely, it does. And I will say, the reason I got back into boxing really as a coach, it actually started when I met Mike Cook. We were at a anti-gun violence rally, and it was a rally for youth. And he was walking through with a belt. And of course, if you've got any boxing experience, if somebody's going to wear a belt outside, you're going to get some questions like,
Mm-hmm.
who are you and why do you have a belt? And so I learned that he was a professional boxer and wanted to help youth. I was in the gang unit here, roughly for over 15 years, and worked a lot with inner city kids, and learned when I was going through boxing that boxing was at least one tool you could use to get involved in young men's lives to maybe teach them some discipline and teach them some internal fortitude. It's a common phrase, as everyone's working hard, put the guns down and doing all these things. And I felt that was one way I could give back.
So I'm sure our audience will be curious to know your favorite amateur boxer and your favorite professional boxer.
Well, they'll be the same, to be honest with you, because, I'm 58 years old. So most of the amateur boxers I know turned pro. And, look, I grew up, obviously in the days of, Mike Tyson
Mm-hmm.
and, you had Sugar Ray Leonard when I
Mm-hmm.
was younger, and you had Roberto Duran. Back then, there were a lot of in the 80s and
Muhammad
90s.
Ali.
Muhammad Ali, yeah, he was a little older when he was still competing,
Okay.
and he would compete against Larry Holmes. But yeah, I watched all those. I had all the magazines, I had everything, and followed everybody. But as far as somebody that I've looked at with fundamentals, you can't. Floyd Mayweather
Mm-hmm.
is just, if you're a boxer, you just know what he is able to accomplish inside that ring is just unbelievable. A lot of fans, they're not real happy when somebody uses a lot of defense, but as a boxing coach, that one of the hardest things to do in the ring is actually, you know, hit and not get hit is the way we say it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, watching what he was able to accomplish in his career was amazing.
Yes, teach me about boxing.
Yes.
I'm definitely learning something about that today. Judge, I moved here in 2010. And so I didn't know about some of Memphis's famous cases prior to.
Mhm.
And I believe in 2008, you were a lead prosecutor in the infamous Leicester Street Massacre case. And that case remains one of one of the difficult cases here in Memphis history. And I heard about Shannon Street. All that was after I got here. But is there anything you remember? Because we're coming up on 18 years now with this case. Is there anything specific that you remember about that case?
With Leicester Street? Oh,
Yes.
sure. And I always do say, I understand you're asking questions about me, but certainly what I went through, I wasn't alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some amazing assistant district attorneys with me. Reggie Henderson and Damon Griffin were with me. And then we had a team of victim witness coordinators and investigators, and certainly the work that the police did. But yeah, I mean, I speaking just for me, it, it was one of those life-changing cases for a lawyer for sure, and it definitely took a lot of years off my life personally. We got the call, I believe it was March of 2008, if my memory's right. But it's a call, your own call. At least I was when I was in the gang unit. But, you get this call and we're finding that there's potentially 9 dead um, people in a home, and everything started to unfold from there. And then the work and just the things we had to see and endure handling that case, and then 3 surviving children. It was it's just one of those things that it takes a part out of who your life, and it'll be forever with me. Now, what I want to say though is I handled so many major cases over my career, trying over 60 A and B felony jury trials. I handled over 40 homicide trials, and then thousands of violent crimes cases. So not one is not more special to the other, because, and in my heart, every victim, every victim's family, even, somebody charged with a crime where maybe we didn't have the right person, or at least didn't know what they had actually done. All those cases mean something to people in my line of work. I promise you it does. So to highlight one is a little uncomfortable, but I guess for that case, because of the fact that we had uh, dead women in the house, dead children in the house, and then 2 dead young men, and just the horror of what took place in there really tested, it tests your faith, your will, and then, trying to still be a human being, but do your job is tough.
Who was the judge presiding over that case at the time?
It was Judge Beasley, may he rest in peace. He has since passed away, but it was in Division 10 in front of Judge Beasley. And I think if he was here to talk to you, because I know he said this to other people, there wasn't anybody involved in that case where it didn't change them, no matter what role they had. Gerald Skane just passed away recently, a few days ago, and he was the lead defense attorney on the other side. And him and I actually formed a really deep friendship after going through that case, even though he was the defense attorney and I was the assistant district attorney. But that case, I think, changed their lives, including the police officers, the first
I can
responders.
imagine.
I mean, if you were to talk to anyone that actually touched that case, it was life changing.
In your interview, you were part of First 48 to talk about that as well. And I did see that's on YouTube. So I do want to kind of go back and just kind of, look at it and learn more about that particular case. I am a little bit familiar with the Shannon Street. So you were just coming to Memphis when that happened?
Yeah, I think I don't have a lot of memories of Shannon Street, other than absolutely it's a case that everyone knows that's from here.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yes.
You know, you were the prosecutor on that case, and so Judge Beasley was on the bench.
Yeah.
And just thinking, if you were thought back, like if you were in his shoes on that bench, what do you think would be? What do you think? Anything will be different, or just in his shoes, you would think it just take a toll on you? How do you reflect now
As you mean
you were a
now
judge?
that I'm a
Yes,
judge, and
absolutely.
that's interesting you ask that, because it's really, when I tell people about the fact that I'm a criminal court judge now and I've been on the bench, it'll be 8 months this month, having tried so many cases in front of so many different criminal court judges in all 10 divisions of criminal court back when we had 10. Taking from each of those judges kind of as a lawyer, what, of course we have our opinions of what we like and don't like, but seeing myself up there now, and, when I first got sworn in, and I sat on the bench and I'm looking down in the well is what we would call it. And I had tried cases in front of Judge Skane as well. So, but I'm used to being down at the table, and now you're up high. And I had like this moment of, it wasn't exactly anxiety, but it was like this ambivalent feeling of, wow,
Yeah.
I'm here. When I was down there, and now being a judge for 8 months, I presided over my first jury trial 34 days on the bench. And it was a really surreal moment for me to actually charge the jury when I'm used to being one of the lawyers.
Yeah.
But I think back to Leicester Street, and now I completely understand the stress that Judge Beasley was under, because as the judge, you really are trying to make sure the trial's fair
Sure.
and that you're making good rulings on evidence and that you're protecting the defendant's constitutional rights at the same time giving the state a fair trial. And when you're actually the one in charge of doing that, now I understand why he was stressed, because back then the lawyers would be like, why is the judge stressed? He doesn't have to put the proof on. And that case taught me now as a criminal court judge how important that role is in the system.
I can see that. Wow, Judge, that is so insightful. Let's talk about your stint at 39 years old, right in the middle, prepping for a trial. You were diagnosed with stage 4 bone marrow cancer, and you're in the ICU with a 105-degree temp.
Yeah.
Do you remember what case you were prepping for at that time?
I actually don't. And sadly, back then, when I was supervising the gang unit, we would carry 80 to 90 homicide cases just in our unit. And that's not in the entire building. That's just in the unit. And so, yeah, I remember being in homicide, used to be on the 11th floor at 201. And I was just in there talking to witnesses and getting ready for a trial. And I had been tired, thought it was stress. I'd been to the doctor a bunch. They had done some blood work, and I had a very painful bone marrow biopsy where it didn't show cancer, but it showed that my blood counts were dropping, all three. And so at the time, they just diagnosed me with what they called mild aplastic anemia. And so I left there, and then fast forward to that day, I'm getting ready for trial. I had gone back in, I guess it was a week or so before this trial, because I was feeling worse. And so they did another biopsy, and I was just waiting on those results. And I had a bunch of missed calls from the doctor, but it was the nurse trying to reach me. And I didn't answer any of them because I finished, getting ready for trial. Anyway, at some point, I called the number back, and I want to say I was back in my office at 157 Poplar by myself in my office. And I finally got the nurse, and she's like, we need you to come in immediately. And of course, I'm arguing with her to a degree and saying, why can't I'm starting a trial? And she's like, no, you have to come in. But it was like they didn't want to tell me over the phone. And then my memory is Dr. Jones got on the phone and was like, Ray, you have cancer. And I remember the room spinning. It's still hard for me to talk about. The room was spinning. When you get told that at 39, it's tough. It was the mood that I might pass. And so, and I remember being so sick. And so I was laying there, and I had family in the waiting room, and a lot of 201 people in and out of the waiting room, which found out later. But anyway, so I remember kind of passing out in ICU. And then I woke up, and I was in a different room. And I remember my infectious disease doctor was fooling around with some bags up by my head, and looked down, and I was breathing, and I looked around, and he said, the treatment's working. And that was in 2006, and here I am today with you.
How did that ordeal kind of shape your perspective on your purpose? So you know that you're here for a purpose. What did you feel in that moment after, you feel like you're healthy now, you're healed, and you're ready to kind of take on the world? And specifically make sure that Memphis is in a good way, on the bench. How do you feel about your perspective with that?
Yeah. Well, I will say, I mean, I try to tell people I don't like talking about this, but then a lot of other people have said you might be able to help someone else.
Absolutely.
With some hope. Because my prognosis was bad. In other words, I got a bad one. It wasn't, and I'm still here. and not everybody is as fortunate. As I said, my friend Gerald Skane, he just passed away this past week. But the story I tell is there was a moment where I had to come to terms with the fact I may pass. And I try to tell people, you know, what do you think about that moment? And it was interesting because I didn't think about any case I had tried.
Mhm.
I didn't think about any accomplishment I had in my career. I remember thinking, was I a good person? How did I treat people? And yeah, as a lawyer, what was my reputation? And was I good to the people I loved? And then certainly regret anybody
That's a
that
very
I
humble
loved.
perspective.
Right. And so, but what was strange with the whole thing is we worked so hard to get to places. And I got that moment where I had to face the possibility that 39 years is all I get. And so what that's given me now is more of I still I still probably put too much into career versus personal life, but I look at that as a call to service because it's
Mhm.
public service.
Mhm.
But you can't take all that too seriously anymore, like for me, because I know that's not everything,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. I don't know if
It
that makes
it
sense,
makes a lot of
but
sense.
yeah, but so right. So I think that we've all got to be careful how hard we work
Mhm.
for something if we're letting other things that are good
Mhm.
go.
Well, Judge, I do appreciate your words of wisdom on that. Thank you so much. So let's talk about your time in juvenile court as a magistrate judge. I know that you said that one of the judge's responsibility is to make a decision, and a lot of the cases that you handle are high stress. We're high stress. You're dealing with children, troubled youth. And
Absolutely.
in juvenile court, a lot of times you're making decisions between two bad options. So kind of paint a picture as to what that looked like, when you were serving on the bench as a juvenile court judge.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say, I had already handled major cases at 201 Poplar before I became a juvenile court magistrate. And so, um, I really, other than being over there for what we call transfer hearings, like there's felonies where a lawyer will be sent over to determine if the district attorney's office is going to seek a notice to try a youth or a child as an adult. Um, but I didn't realize what the magistrates were doing over there every day. And I would say the hardest docket for me personally was dependency and neglect. And so presiding over those cases and you're basically dealing with allegations of abuse or children living in horrible conditions. And you're trying to make a determination on what is best for the child. And then I presided over foster care review board. And so all these things, and I often tell people, you have to know I was in the gang for 14, 15 years. It's not a secret that I dealt with a lot of youth, from 12 to, and we can even say to 24, but
Mhm.
certainly 12 to 17. But I was handling these major cases and there would always be these brown files in my file, and it was the juvenile court history. And so I would open them, but it wasn't really anything necessary in the case I had, but they would have all these designations like warning counsel, and it would say D/N, and then there'd be a social history. And so I told my colleagues that it's like I started at the end of the book,
Mhm.
and then I was taken back to the beginning of the book. And so now I'm presiding over cases where there's a child in my courtroom and that brown file is getting created, if that makes any sense. And so then learning from that side of things, um, it was hard because everybody in that courtroom, from the guardian ad litem to the lawyers to the judges, were trying to do what's best for the child. But then you'd be left, as you asked me, with sometimes these decisions where you don't have, this is a bad decision, this is a good decision. you've got, this is the worst decision, but you could make this one that's not as bad as that one. And that really took a toll on me because it's like, these are children and we ought to have more resources. And by the way, a lot of great work being done at juvenile court. And a lot of that's changed since I've been there too, where there's more programs, more resources. The community is stepping up to help. But being asked what it was like to be a judge there, and I don't think I was alone, it was frustrating. We were spending hours trying to make this decision when we just needed some resources.
What is the number one reason why, outside of neglect, that juveniles are delinquent, or either delinquent or just, I guess, troublesome in a way? Does mental health kind of play a part in that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And mental health plays a huge part in the criminal justice system. I mean, and that's another thing. When I was deputy district attorney, one of my responsibilities is I met monthly with the public defender's mental health team. I learned so much doing that because I didn't know a lot of how much mental health plays a role in all and everything that's happening, but certainly in children.
And I would think that as a juvenile court judge, they're at the right place at the right time, whether they're going to help direct their path
Mhm.
of a juvenile going into adulthood now.
Absolutely.
So depending on whatever verdict or resources or whatever path that they're taking, that may determine the outcome of that adult.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
No, that is correct. And I always start off, because I've been in public service for roughly 25 years out of my 27 as a licensed attorney. And I've played, I've been put in many different roles. But having been part of that and being in meeting after meeting with, everyone interested in helping youth and exchanging ideas and going through the process, I don't find there to be any secrets
Mm-hmm.
about, the role certainly poverty plays.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely education. I mean, and nobody with a straight face could, this is my opinion
Sure.
only.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't ignore the roles that all those things play. And then the family home environment,
Mm-hmm.
like something we would see as judges is, we'd put these great plans together and then send the child right back into the same environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, but there's things within that you can control and there's things you can't. I've often said, people used to ask me because I spent most of my career in probably some of the harder
Mm-hmm.
crimes, more complex cases. Do you give up hope when you look at the numbers? I'm like,
Yeah.
well, the way I look at that, especially at 50, being 58 now, is if all you've done in your life is saved one person, was your life worth it?
Mm.
Well, we're doing that.
Yeah.
So if you let the numbers
Mm-hmm. The
make you
numbers
back
don't
off,
really paint the entire picture.
right, or make you back off from doing the good that you can do, then where are we, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my personal belief is, we need to be focusing on things that have a positive immediate impact
Mm-hmm.
On children, their home environment, education, and you can go on with the list. I mean, like I said, it's not a secret what everybody's battling with juveniles.
I made a statement earlier about, a juvenile court judge is at that juncture where, what you do now may impact, a juvenile's life. And just thinking back, Judge, I'm just going to paint a picture here. If you were a juvenile judge, when Jesse Dotson was coming up and he went to juvenile,
Mm-hmm.
what would you have done differently to make the outcome of the Lester Street Massacre different?
Wow, that's a tough question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. I guess you would have to go back and look at his contact. I mean, if we're using him specifically, his contacts with the system and what efforts, right, were made, because everybody that's in the juvenile court world knows that their rehabilitation is supposed to be the sole focus.
Yes.
The sole focus,
Mm-hmm.
rehabilitation. And so it seems like you'll go in these histories and you'll see just this stepped up process of, all right, this effort didn't work. This effort didn't work. This effort didn't work. Oh, now here we are, right? And child 17 and facing, serious charges. Now what, right? So I don't know. I know for that Jesse Dotson did have contacts with the juvenile court system. And then it's not a secret that he was involved in a murder at 18.
Yeah.
And had served a significant amount of time on that murder before he was released. And so you got to wonder, if you look back at that, what could have been done.
Absolutely, yeah.
When he was 15, 16, 17. I mean, there had to be issues there in his life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. We're just hoping, that the current, of course, judgeship now, like you said, make an impact, even if it's one child at a time, that's still making an impact.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about your journey to the bench. So you're 8 months in, and just one day out of the blue, you were getting all these calls. Your phone was just blowing up with like, okay, Judge, like you're saying, Ray, we want you to apply to be criminal court judge.
Right.
When you looked at your phone and saw all these missed calls, where were you thinking?
Well, it's an interesting, story. My career has had an odd call to service element to it. I was always in a current public service role that I was comfortable being in before the next door opened. And so, to be honest with you, I never in a million years ever thought about being a judge.
Really?
I was going to retire, probably in administration, because I became deputy district attorney. But trial lawyer was what I was going to finish my career doing. And it was a transfer hearing in juvenile court when Judge Michael asked to see me. Of course, whenever a judge asks to see you, the first thought is, well, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
And I had my file with me, and I went and spoke to him, and he said, do you want to be a judge? Now, up to that moment, I had never thought about being a judge one day. And so I looked at it and I said, well, it's an opportunity I should not turn down. And let's see whether or not I have what it takes to be in that robe. Because you don't know. If a lawyer tells you it's never been a judge, knows for sure what they're going to be like when they're a judge, no, it's not possible, because some lawyers turn out to be great judges and some don't. So I didn't know, and I wasn't trying to say I knew. So I remember standing in the hallway in the robe before I opened court the very first time in juvenile court, and I had no clue what I would be like. Now, I spent 2 years there, and I was not unhappy. And the work I was doing there was hard. It was important. The public service fulfillment for me was full. But then, I got contacted by the district attorney and was like, hey, how would you like to come back and run an office you spent most of your career in? And that's an office of 230 people, 100 lawyers. And I even remember when I spoke to Judge Michael about it, it was interesting because he's like, well, that's not something you can turn down, right? I was like, yeah, that's a great opportunity. So I left the bench to answer that next call to service. And I was there for 5.5 years under 2 different district attorneys. And when I retired from the DA's office, I went into the criminal appeals division as kind of I just needed to get away from the stress of running an office that big. We had been through a pandemic. I had been through an election. And I even told DA Mulroy, I was like, look, he's coming in with all this new energy. I had been there 5.5 years and I'm just tired. And so I decided to retire after a year from that role. So anyway, I was working from home 2 days a week.
Okay.
Typing appellate briefs. and I was in a meeting, and I guess Judge Skane had announced her retirement, and I had a bunch of text messages and a
That's
unique.
because your reputation precedes you.
Well, I will say this though. For me personally, the reason why that story is important isn't because of how many I got. It was the different people. It was defense attorneys. It was former ADAs. It was from police. It was support staff. It was a mix of people just asking me if I would consider going for that appointment. And then I called, reached out to some judges I trusted, one in particular who will remain nameless, and got advice on whether or not this is something I should go for.
Right.
And everybody said I should, and I did, and now I'm here.
And it was between you and a lady, Mrs. Kenya Smith. The seat, was she also
Well, it originally, and I don't know if the public understands how it works, but you got to go through a rigorous judicial application and then what's called a public hearing.
Okay.
And then after the public hearing, this commission sends names up to the governor, and then you each meet with the governor. So at the time, it was when I first got in, it was Laura Fowler, Jahari Dowdy, me, and Kenya Smith, who I know, and kind of started out there. When the whole process, and I believe Miss Fowler had gotten another job that she really wanted and kind of withdrew her name. And then I believe me and Kenya got sent to the governor, if memory serves me. And then we met, and then I got appointed.
Full circle moment. I mean, thinking about your purpose, everything that you have endured to get to this point. I mean, this is an amazing story. I mean, you just can't discount that. I love that for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It means a lot.
Well, Judge, I would like for you to educate our audience on what the role and responsibility of the criminal court judge and what you do, because sometimes people don't really always understand. And so educate us.
Sure. And okay, and this is good because it is true. Most people don't know what a criminal court judge does. And a lot of times there's confusion between general sessions criminal court and criminal court. And so essentially, criminal court handles all major felony cases and that have had probable cause hearings. And then any misdemeanor that's not resolved in general sessions court. So when you hear the term jury trial, only criminal court judges can preside over jury trials and handle major felonies. And so my docket every day, unfortunately, consists of anywhere from 50 to 70 major violent crimes. It's a lot of murders, rapes, robberies, kidnappings, crimes against children, certainly property crimes for repeat offenders, and then any misdemeanor case that's not resolved in general sessions criminal court. And so my day consists of presiding over those cases, making sure the defendants have representation, making sure that the lawyers are moving the cases along, presiding over a trial when necessary. We have hearings. Sometimes I am in charge of sentencing. Sometimes I'm in charge of bonds, whether it's setting bail or if somebody charged with a crime wants me to look at whether or not their bail should be reduced, I perform that function as well. And then I handle guilty pleas. So if the state and the defense come to an agreement in a case, I have to approve that agreement. I have to hear why they're doing it. And then I have to make sure the defendant's constitutional rights are protected before I accept that person's guilty plea. So it's everything that goes along with handling essentially the worst of the worst cases. And I have, like all the other criminal court judges, we have full dockets, unfortunately, of a lot of major cases.
Speaking of full dockets, what concerns you now about where our city is headed as it relates to crime?
Well, having been in Memphis 30 years, that is obviously something that's probably being discussed right now by some other people than you and me right now. And it's a subject that's so important to all of us, that I just believe good people are really trying to come together and come up with, what can we do? Now, as you know, there's so much disagreement over what is the right approach.
Yeah.
And then there's some agreement on some of the approaches. And so having spent, I would say 25 years in that line of work, I'm going to say this. We as citizens aren't benefiting any child or any person charged with a crime or any victim of a crime if we're just fighting with each other. If all we do is yell and scream at each other and don't listen, and there's no love in the component or the process, this is just me speaking because you asked me the question, right? Then all we do is go in circles, and then the people suffering just continue to suffer. And so for me, I think that there's a lot of initiatives that good people are doing that are making a difference, right? And so when you talk about this idea that assistant district attorneys and defense lawyers and judges are in this system where we're just trying to lock everybody up, well, I'm here to tell you, just for me, that has not been my experience, and that everyone is working hard for what I call alternative relief. That's actually what the law calls it, is looking at alternative ways to resolve issues and crime without just straight confinement, right? And that's been going on a while. There's a lot of people trying to change the course. Like when you asked the question earlier about what can juvenile court do to change a child's
Yes.
the path they're on, right? Get them off that path. Well, we're doing the same things too in criminal court, because I don't want the public to get this idea that, once the case gets to criminal court, we've given up on, you know what I mean? Like we're coming to work every day. We've given up on that person. If you were to sit in the courtrooms and really see the work being done by all parties to try and do the right thing for a person. And sometimes, by the way, now some people don't want to hear this, but sometimes most people are in agreement that, okay, maybe the appropriate consequence in that case is confinement. But that is not how you start off looking at anybody's case. I mean,
no matter the crime.
Right. No, you're trying to first start with, what is it can we do? I guess the best way to answer this, and it is a complicated question. I've often said that our system is designed to be case by case basis. Where you get into danger, in my humble opinion, is when you start these broad brush things. So in other words, you take somebody charged, and no matter what that charge is, you do the same thing every time when you see that charge.
So no cookie cutter approach.
Right. So what you don't do is you don't look behind the charge and look at the person. Well, the law is designed to actually make you look at things on a case-by-case basis. That's why prior criminal history is important. That's why the circumstances of the individual's life are important. There's all these factors that the judge has to look at, which isn't really the public's not aware of, but it's by law that the judge has to look at these factors when making a sentencing determination, when deciding what the appropriate consequence is for a probation violation, all those things. I would say that, there's so many people trying to change laws, but I think the critical part of our justice system is you've got to get qualified, experienced people in these positions who have a real knowledge of the law, but have a good heart.
Absolutely.
Because I think it starts with the heart, and then it goes from there.
So love plus law equals maybe.
That might be a T-shirt. Love plus law. But seriously, and all the people that I work with at 201, I don't care, you could name a role. We all know that. And we all know you get to know someone's heart essentially by their actions.
Yes.
And, that's kind of something that goes back to when I was in ICU. When I remembered, like, what reputation did my name carry if it was mentioned in my line of work? And, based on the blessing of feedback that I've gotten, up to this point in my career, I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone that didn't find me fair, didn't find me to be, work hard, try to listen and try to get to the root of a problem. Not saying they've always agreed with
Of
my
course.
final decision. Whether that was handling a case as an ADA or as a juvenile court magistrate or now presiding over cases. Because I can tell you already, I've been on the bench 8 months, and there were a lot of lawyers happy to get me up there. And the next thing you know, I'm ruling, and they're looking at me like, I don't like you anymore. I was like, it's a tough
You
job.
can't please anybody.
No, right.
Yeah, I'm sure these 8 months have just been a whirlwind, and you're still learning, of course.
Absolutely. And that's a hard thing too, is trying to learn the job and be in the very job that I'm now, as you know,
of course,
running for. And so that's a whole nother world, trying to juggle those two things.
So what do you want voters to know specifically about the environment that you've built in your courtroom? Because we are for re-election, of course.
Sure.
So what do you want voters to know about your courtroom?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think part of it is I've carried my history of my public service into court with me as a judge. When you talk about judicial temperament, I think that's the thing you'll hear first, especially from lawyers, but even from people that walk into a judge's courtroom, whether you're the person charged with a crime or you're the victim of a crime or you're a witness or an officer, whatever your role is, when you walk into a courtroom, judicial temperament's usually the first thing you'll hear them say is, how does the judge treat people? And I think, now I've been on the bench 8 months, but so I'm not here to ask anyone to take a leap of faith or to promise something, because you can come see it. You can come to my courtroom and watch what I do. I believe I treat everybody that comes into my courtroom with respect, and that's without respect of persons. No matter what they look like, what they're accused of doing, or what's happening, I try to have that respect of human beings, regardless of the hard work we're doing. But then added to that is that's not enough to be a judge in criminal court. You've got to have the knowledge of the law. You deal with complex issues every day as a judge. Well, handling the complex cases I did over a 20-year period prepared me to be able to wear the robe and make very complicated rulings in very tough cases. And then fairness. I think integrity and fairness. That's a word that's thrown around about judges. You'll hear it a lot on campaign trails. But if you do your research into my background, and I say this to everybody that I meet, I'm not going to just walk right up to you and say, vote for me. Honestly, I just want you to do your homework. Research me before you make your decision. Really find out who I am before you make your decision. And then once you do that, whatever you decide, I'm at peace with.
So, Judge, it sounds like you don't wear that robe lightly. When you put that robe on, it means something. It means fairness, and you are going to do what you can to leave a legacy on the bench.
Yes.
So if reelected, what is the ultimate legacy you want to build for Shelby County?
Well, I'll tell you, we've had judges pass away, and we recently had Judge Wyman pass. And he was actually the judge in Division I for many, many years before Judge Skane took over, and then she had 20 years. And it's interesting you're asking that question, because for the first time, I went to a judge's funeral as a judge.
Wow.
It was my very first time. So a lot of times the judges will put the robes on. I used to see the judges when I would go to those funerals as a lawyer, and they'd all be sitting in the front row. But for the first time, I was sitting in a robe listening to what somebody else was saying about a judge and how they lived their life. And to answer that question is, I would like to leave the legacy I left with my other public service careers, and that is, you know, he had a good heart. He always tried to do what was right. He was prepared. He was hardworking, but he had a reverence for the position. You know, I will be honest with you. Me personally, I probably had a resume to go for this position years ago, but I had such a respect for the criminal court bench that I didn't feel it was right for me yet. And then I got to this moment now that I'm 58 and I've got, 25 years of service, and it seemed like the next answer call to service for me. So I would love to end my career on the bench, having that legacy that when you walked into Judge Lepone's courtroom, even if you didn't like his decision, you felt like you left a place where you were treated fairly, with respect, and that the judge was prepared, had a good knowledge of the law, and tried to do what was right.
I love that answer. So, Judge, is there anything that I haven't asked that you want our viewers to know?
No, I think you've been pretty thorough, and and I do appreciate the time. As you know, the hardest part about running, when you have to run for the job you actually have, it's a little different, process. And what's, to me, it's difficult because think about how many people there are in Shelby County. I mean, think about it. How am I going to get to know all those people between now and August 6th? So I don't know really what else I would say, but I would say, first of all, get out and vote. Really. I mean, you hear that all the time. Definitely get out and vote.
Well, how can they learn more about you?
Well, obviously you can Google my name. I mean, now, and I'm not a big social media person.
Okay.
No offense to social media. We're on a podcast. But, but yes, you can go to judgeRayLepone.com, but that's just like the standard stuff. I think, what I encourage people to do is find somebody that either has worked in juvenile court or 201 public in any capacity, and then first find out if they know me. Now, they may not, but start there and ask them, what do you know about Ray Lepone? That's what I would want voters to do, because that's the easiest way you can find out, right? Because I'm here talking about me, but I always encourage people to talk to people who have worked with me, been in front of me as a judge, had a case with me when I was a lawyer. And that's what I would hope the voters do.
Okay. And give your website one more time.
It's JudgeRayLepone.com. And it's Lepone.
Lepone.
And the reason I say is I have football trophies where it was LA.
Okay.
P-O-N-E. So people misspell my name quite frequently.
Lepone.
Yes, ma'am.
As we close out this episode, I want to leave you with these words by Martin Luther King. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. And Judge, I feel like that you are that man.
Well, I appreciate that.
And I appreciate you being on the show. You guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Amanda Avery signing off.
Thank you.